Why don't we get started?
Cool.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking all the time. My name is Akshay, and I'll be the moderator for this session, and Jayesh will sort of be driving us through the content. Quick context before we get started. So, Jayesh and I work together at Ask9.io, which is a site reliability engineering platform. But over the past few months of working together, we've realized that there's a lot of content that exists on what is SLO, what is SLI, but there is very few content that is really there on how to actually get started and how to really start using these terms in your day-to-day life in your organizations, right? So we thought that this will be a very helpful session for all of you who are at a similar stage of career and wanting to understand how to actionably start using SLOs or service level objectives in your organizations, right? With that context, Jayesh, over to you. I would love if everyone can please be involved. Please keep posting your questions on the chat, and I'll keep taking it up with Jayesh. Awesome, over to you, man.
Thank you, Akshay, and welcome everyone again. So, as Akshay said, today we'll be talking about SLOs, but we want the session to be very interactive. So Akshay might have some questions for you in between. So we will definitely love your feedback, love your answers to them, and make it interactive session if possible. So before jumping into SLOs, before defining SLIs, before saying what is SLO, what is SLI, I will start with a story. So a story of an incident. I used to work with a large fintech org in the past, and one fine day what happened is there was a big incident. And the big incident was in a time when a large sport event was going on in the country and the incoming payment request suddenly increased. What happened with the increasing payment request increasing is the payment started failing. And being a payments company, every second of failure was contributing to a loss in revenue. And as you know as well, the reputation is also at a core, is also one of the factors at risk here. So the business folks ask engineering and ops why this whole thing happened. And the answer was the whole payment service was performing up to the mark. It was up all the time. It was running, and still the payments were failing. So in this case, the whole contribution to this failure was by a third-party service, a third-party payment service they were using, a payment gateway they were using, and that was contributing to this continuous failures. And here, the main factor was payment failures, the loss in payment success rate and the payment service being up or down. And to figure out this whole thing, they took hours, and that costed them significant and uncoverable business loss as well as reputation loss. So how can you solve this, and how business reacted to this and how ops reacted to this? So the business reaction to this problem was they lacked easy way to correlate the business impact with the incident. And obviously, they blamed IT for the incident because the ops people, the IT people didn't know what caused the failure, and they couldn't tell them in a right time. So how can we solve the problem of lacking a way? How can we solving the problem of providing a way to easily correlate this business impact with the incident? How ops reacted to the whole situation? As business folks said that this whole incident was because we were not tracking enough metrics, we were not tracking enough metric, we are not having enough alerts in the system. Ops went ahead and started collecting even more metrics to avoid more such incidents in the future. They created correlations, they created more dashboards, which might help them whenever this kind of incident happens in future. And again, the I want one more alert syndrome kicks in, and they created a few more alerts to make sure that whenever this kind of incident happens again, they get alerted. So while we are discussing this incident, it's very important to understand what are the business expectations and what are how ops measures things. So what are the business expectations? What business expects is responsive and error-free services. And how business measures this is speed and quality of your services, speed and quality of your application, speed and quality of a software you're providing. And what ops measures to ensure the speed and quality is resources, CPUs, memories, and disk. This has been classical measures most of the companies, most of the ops teams have been following to measure speed and quality. And how ops measures their successes? The high availability of a system, no resource exhaustion, and low cost of infrastructure. What this all results in? This all results in a huge metric collection and storage infrastructure. This all results in alerts which are going 24/7 and causing fatigue. This all results in metrics which are spread across multiple products because the one product which you are using to track your metrics wasn't enough. So you needed to go to CloudWatch, you needed to go to Sentry, you needed to go to multiple products to collect different metrics. And you never went ahead and figured out a way to channelize all them and figure out a single way to measure your system. And when we talk about single way, there was no way to objectively measure your system. This all measures were spread across different products, different channels, and there was no way to objectively measure how is your system performing at any single point in the time. So what do we want actually out of all this? We want a simpler, more responsive observability, a way to observe into my system, the way to analyze my system in a simplistic, in a more responsive way. We want this whole thing to be aligned with business. When ops measures something, that should be aligned with business goals, that should be aligned with what business wants, and the disengagement over here needs to be addressed. We want faster paths to improvement because what gets measured gets improved. And to improve your system continuously, you need to measure right things. You need to measure simple things, but be more responsive about them. And the faster paths to improvement come with defining or measuring the right things. So how do we go there? So we start monitoring services and not really servers. As we have seen in the incident I described, the ops team was measuring servers, the ops team was measuring the resource exhaustion, the ops team was measuring uptime, and all the resource metrics for the system they were using, and not really talking in the service context. In here, the most important thing comes in a service correlation, service interdependencies, and measuring those interdependencies, measuring those performance of those third-party services becomes important when we are working in the modern cloud-native systems which are distributed. So, second thing comes in as I talk about the focus on service level metrics and service delivery. So instead of focusing on servers, we are now focusing on services. We are more focused on the service delivery. We are more focused on the service level metrics, the availability of a service, the error rate of a service, how the service is performing, how the service dependencies are performing, than how the servers on which the service is running are performing. So that's where the abstraction comes in, and and that's what solves the three goals we have here: the simple, more responsive observability, alignment with the business, and providing the faster paths to improvement. So to do all this, as I said, the metrics spread across different products, all the problems we discuss about. To solve those problems, we need to have an indicator or metric which shows how well your service is performing at any point in time. And that's where SLI comes in. SLI is a service level indicator. So as we defined in the previous discussion, the business goals we had were speed and quality. To provide a measure which can help business teams understand if the application we have, the software we have, satisfies these two goals for them, the speed and quality of the application. And as the classical ops team were measuring resource consumption, cache hit rate, garbage collection time, and so many resource metrics, it is very hard for business people to understand how this translates into what they are trying to achieve. So if an ops person goes to a business person or CEO or CTO and says my resource consumption is going up or down, how that translates into the impact on my revenue, how that translates into the speed of a service, how that translates into the quality of a service we are providing, is not really clear. There has to be something in between which addresses this gap. And that's where the SLIs come in. The latency, availability, uptime, error rate. These are the SLIs which help business people understand how their system is performing at any given point. And so why we are calling them good SLIs? So there's a reason. How do we define a good SLI? So good SLI is a SLI, or it's a measure which is very relevant to service delivery, which is very clear, unambiguous, which is very easy to communicate to all the stakeholders, may it be even non-technical people. And what this all does is it provides a common language for entire organization to measure the performance objectively. So now that I know these are the four measures I'm measuring for my system, and everybody in my team, everybody across my organization understands what's availability, what's error rate, what latency, and they can easily translate it to their objective. They can easily set the objectives on top of those SLIs and work towards satisfying them. So as we are talking about setting objectives now, we talked about SLIs, and as I said, everybody across the organization can now go ahead and set an objective, set a goal on top of your SLI. So SLO is basically a goal for your SLI, and we call it the full form here is service level objectives. So as we will be discussing these three terms across even this presentation and even the upcoming sessions we have, let's just differentiate between SLI, SLO, and SLA, and then we can go ahead and talk about SLO specifically. So SLI, as we discussed in the previous slides, is a key indicator. So in this case, we are assuming it's latency. SLO is objective or goal for your SLI. In this case, I'm saying that my latency should be below 300 milliseconds 99% of the time. We'll understand how this what is the 99%, why I'm setting it below 300 milliseconds, and all those things in the upcoming slides. But let's just set a goal for my SLI that my latency, which is my SLI, should be below 300 milliseconds 99% of the time. SLA, a service level agreement, tells you what happens if this goal is not met, if the SLO is not met. So if my latency is not below 300 milliseconds 99% of the time, what happens is it's what is defined in SLA. So as we have I hope we have a little bit clarity on this, let's move forward to example of SLO, what SLO really looks like. So as we're discussing the same thing, latency should be below 300 milliseconds 99% of the times over the period of 7 days. Here latency is my SLI. Below 300 milliseconds is my goal, and 99% of the times is my compliance target, and the period of 7 days is my compliance period. If these terms sound very alien to you, we will definitely we have a few blog posts written around them, which we will share the links across for, and we will do a detailed deep dive into all of these terms in the upcoming sessions as well. So, but to give you a high level overview, we talked about SLI. The below 300 milliseconds, as I said, is the objective for my SLI. 99% of the time, I'm saying the compliance target. So it can be a major a threshold I'm putting on my on my SLO. So it can be 99%, it can be 99.99%, 99.999% to 95%, whatever you feel is suitable for your system or achievable for you. And the 7 days, we are measuring this over the 7 days, a rolling window for 7 days, and figuring out if I'm able to achieve this. So this is the SLO. So how do you really set an SLO?
Jayesh, sorry, just before we go there, if you could go to the previous slide. Yeah. There's a quick question on a DM saying that, how does one really think about which period to take, right? And I know we said we'll cover it in a further session, but yeah, if you could just give us an example of how does one really come up with 7 days? Is it just calendar week convenience? Is it sprint time? How does one think about it?
Ideally, it should be your time of your sprint, or maybe 2x of your sprints, just to make sure that the AOI budget you have for the sprint or the threshold you set for the sprint, or the changes which you are doing in the next sprint is not affecting your budget in this particular sprint. So it should be ideally days you have in a sprint, maybe 7 days or 15 days, or maybe 2x of that for that matter, if you're talking about delivery of a feature. So if the delivery happens over a month, like the release cycles are for a month, can be 2x of your 15-day sprint, or if the delivery is 15 days, you can go with the number of days in a sprint as well. So that can be the period for major.
Makes sense. Also, I think, as this is also an internal facing view, right? Given on like how much is my sprint time. But if you remember the example that we came across in one of our customers, right, that it can also be an external facing view, right? So if we have to think about the period that a customer really cares about in a particular service, I think that can also be an example for a particular compliance period, right? For example, if a customer is sort of thinking about your service for say 14 days and will not come again to your service after on the 15th day, then you should think about compliance across that entire target period, right? And that can be another way to think about it as we use in our particular service also. But it makes a lot of sense. Sorry, please go ahead. I thought I'd just clarify the question for the audience.
Cool. So as we are going with SLOs and how do we set an SLO? Let's say.
Sorry, Jayesh, can everyone hear him? Prathamesh, can you hear Jayesh?
Can you hear me
yes.
Now we can hear.
Yes, cool. Okay. So as we're talking about setting an SLO and going through the process of setting an SLO, let's say setting an SLO is easy. So how do we do that? There are 4 steps. You identify the business impacting SLIs, and what are those SLIs we discussed in the previous steps. And what is the definition of how do we define a good SLIs? We discussed that in the previous steps as well. You set a threshold on the SLIs. That will be the goal for your SLI. As in the previous SLO, we said that for latency, I want it to be below 300 milliseconds. And select the compliance window. And can be 7 days, as we discussed, that can be 14 days, a month, whatever you define a compliance window as. And then you configure alert channel, and whenever that SLO is under threat or breach, or whenever you're not able to achieve it, you will receive an alert. You should receive an alert. So although this process at a very high level sounds very easier, there are bits and pieces, there are nuances in this process. And how do you address those nuances? How do you understand this process well? Or how to make this process very simpler to understand and implement? That's where we came up with SLO Computer. At SLO Computer, we made this process very easy for everybody to understand, and everybody to try out SLOs for free. So how do you do that? What SLO Computer offers is it offers you quick and seamless data ingestion. If you are already storing your metrics in Prometheus, you can start sending them to SLO Computer and go ahead and set an SLO on those metrics itself. The custom metrics at your fingertips. So you can custom build your SLI expressions and set the thresholds of them, set the objectives of them. You can set the desired compliance period, set the alert channel you want to receive alert on. That's it. You start getting value, start measuring your system objectively, and you start getting alerts whenever your SLOs are under threat or SLOs are breached. So instead of talking about the whole thing, let me just show you how you can set SLO in 4 easy steps with SLO Computer. Once you go to app.last9.io/SLO and sign in with your business email ID, you will see down here, there's a Prometheus tab. Once you go to Prometheus tab, there's a remote write configuration. And just copy this configuration, paste it to your Prometheus configuration file, so save it. It will start sending metrics to SLO Computer. You start receiving the metrics and go ahead, click on the tab, create SLO. And you can name your SLO anything. So here, test. So if you want to add a link to any dashboard, like a Grafana dashboard or Last Time dashboard or any other service dashboard for that matter, related to this particular SLO, you can add the link here. Then you can go ahead and select any metric. So say up. And once I select a metric, it gives me a latest 20 values for that particular metric, which will also help me understand the SLI expression for this particular metric I'm setting. And as you might have observed here, once I start typing, it also you enter a colon, it also shows you what are the available metrics or what are the metrics you're sending to SLO computer. And you can select any of these metric and set an objective on that. So here I'm going with set up. And as I know, the value for this is 26 all of the time. So I'm setting this metric, going to SLI expression and saying it should be about 25 or so 28. And once I set this, you can see it is performing well for last 2 hours. If I go and set it less than 26, it says it's broken for last complete 2 hours. So let's just go with 27 for now. And the compliance period, I can choose the compliance period of 7 days, sprint period here, and set the compliance target of 99.99%. And I go to notification. I set the channel I want to receive alert on, a Slack channel URL or a webhook, and select the alerts I want to receive. I have enabled threat and breach alerts, and I click on create SLOs. But if you might have noticed, as I said, there are nuances in the complete process. So how do we help you address the nuances? While you are going through this process, you can see on the right-hand side here, we have this help text, which will help you understand how SLOs are computed. When you go to metric, what is a valid PromQL query you can add? When you go to SLI expression, it tells you what is an SLI expression and how do you define SLI expression. When you go to compliance, it also tells you what is the ideal compliance period, what is the compliance target. And actually, as we had a question that how do you define the compliance period, you can find the answer for that here as well. That what is the compliance period, what is the compliance target, you can read this. And accordingly, you can set the compliance period and target, you can set notification channel. And once I do that, you can just create a SLO and that's it. It's as easy as this to create a SLO and start using SLOs with SLO computer. So that was.
I think Jayesh, sorry, if you could just also go back. We had one question from the invitees who couldn't make it, but I'll take it probably for the group. So one of the issues that I think a lot of fellow engineers face is what SLO to start off, right? Like I don't know what is my current performance to know what is my desired performance. So okay, I want 99.9, but like how do I know what my current performance is? And if we see in the step 3, as you had mentioned, right? But we are able to sort of tell you what is the current performance at this particular level, say 27, right? If we can understand that, say at 27 we are at 100%, then okay, we can be more aggressive and sort of have like much more serious targets, right? But if we don't know what the current performance is, it's very tough to start start setting SLOs on some random number, right? So as I think also the theme of this presentation or the future one that we will have, right, is how to actively start using SLOs in a day-to-day organization. I think this is one of the steps that also came up in our research, right? That telling us where to start is actually the first step of setting our SLOs, right? That's something that I just want to call out for the group.
And definitely, as we have even observed, one of the user of the SLO computer itself was not able to, so they were struggling with achieving 95% availability. And how we started with them is we asked them to first go with 95, the 96, the 97, and eventually, as you optimize and even go further, eventually you can become 99% available. You can go to 99.9, 99.99, and then go ahead and chase that last 9. Sorry for the selfie slide.
Yeah. But I would love to open the floor to the group. If there's any question on whatever we have covered so far. I know we had blocked a slightly larger time, but I think that's completely fine, right? Anyone has any questions in the audience? would love to clarify and sort of take it up for the broader interest of the group.
And we will also share this presentation across. We also have linked the few of the blog posts we have around SLOs and how you can measure them. And you can definitely go click on them, read through them to understand the things even better. And we'll also have the series going on, which will definitely help you understanding nuances around SLOs, understanding nuances around reliability, and and all help you even further.
I think Mahesh has a question. Mahesh, you could please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I have this question of we have a API service that we give out at LoadShare to some of our clients, and there is an expectation saying that the API should respond within 750 milliseconds. Okay. Now, obviously, what this means is that our SLO is that P99 is 750 milliseconds for like a week period or a daily period, whatever the type. But internally, that service is made of multiple sub-services, right? So we measure the 750 millisecond output, okay?
Yep.
But what we see is that this 750 millisecond output is affected by internal couple of services. For example, we use a database. We use a sub service which we make a call of and do. Sometimes what we've seen is whenever there is a breach, it is because one of the service went up. Okay. So is there anything where for an external facing SLO, there are internal facing SLOs that we can monitor? So I would want to say this DB, I don't want it to, give more than 350 out of the 750 millisecond budget that I have. Is there anything that we can use to do something like that? Obviously, this is purely internal.
Yes, definitely. So again, as long as you're tracking that with a metric, you have a metric for the database which tracks a P99 for that. And as long as you have, if you have it in Prometheus, you connect to Prometheus, you set a SLO on that metric.
I mean,
of
we just have AWS CPU utilization and these kind of things only we have. Is that sufficient for this to do?
Sorry, can you repeat?
No, I said we have AWS metrics, whatever we are on AWS. So is that sufficient, or do we need to do this Prometheus and all of that?
No, so those metrics should be sufficient enough. But the only quirk is right now we don't directly integrate with CloudWatch on the SLO computer, but definitely we have plans to do that in future. So it will be available soon as well. But in between, if you are exporting those metrics to Prometheus, and then if we are able to get those via Prometheus, you can definitely set the alert, set the internal SLOs for that. Like as you said, for that database service, you wanted it to be 350 milliseconds. You can set that and track that. So yes, that's doable. And definitely feel free to drop an email to me or Akshay this, and we will let you know once we have that integration up as well.
Okay, sure. Yes, that'll be
reach out to you, Mahesh. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that question. I think it helped. I think other folks who were probably also thinking about similar scenarios, right? Any other question, folks? Nagesh has a question. Please go ahead, Nagesh.
Thanks, Akshay. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes. Thanks, Jayesh. It was good to hear. I have two questions. One, mainly on the point that you brought up about simpler and responsible observability and then alignment with business. When you said alignment with business, is there a way for now to define, like SLO definition is simple with this way, but is there a way to aggregate, like abstract more enough to define at a higher level, like you define capabilities or some feature that you basically give out, like AWS does, and then measure those in terms of different SLOs that you have? Is there a way for that to define? That's my first question. Another question was about, is there a way to view the error budget, basically, like how much leeway you have basically, before you will breach your SLOs. These are two questions that I have.
Cool. So for the error budget one, we currently send a threat alert whenever your SLO is under threat. So if you have assigned you're allocated a compliance target of 99% and you are already at 96 or 98, we will send you an alert saying if you don't take an action right now, maybe you will breach an SLO for the compliance duration you have. So we do that currently. That helps you stay in your error budget you have set. So that's one thing. The second one, I didn't understand. The first question you had, I didn't understand it from the AWS thing you said.
So what I was asking is from the business perspective, right? When we want to align with the business, there are multiple SLOs responsible for a certain feature, right? Let's say you have something like reporting, which probably depends on a lot of different services, and SLOs for them will be different. So is there a way for here to aggregate the SLOs together and define in terms of capabilities? Like, let's say you have a feature and that feature depends on like 10 different SLOs. Is there a way to do that?
So currently we don't group the SLOs. So any SLO set will show under this on this dashboard. So any SLO, any member in your organization sets will show up in the same dashboard. We currently don't support any labels or grouping for this, but definitely in the roadmap we will. And we even received this feedback one more time. So we definitely want to provide a capability to group these SLOs under a particular feature for particular service. So it will be easier for folks who are looking at that particular service or that particular part of the product to easily understand what's going on in that particular. So yes, got the feedback and we will definitely try to act upon it. So thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Nagesh. I think there's a question on the chat from Sandeep. I'll read it out for the audience. But some of our clients are desktop clients, so client-side latency is more important than business perspective. Also, in some workflows, it is important to know how long UI is blocked, as other than just latency of request. How do companies collect and use client-side metrics for SLO? Is there any pattern on how one should go about doing this?
So, a very recent relevant example to an extent, one of the customer we have who is using Last9, they have been facing a similar problem where they have a mobile application and they send a request to one external service, which basically helps them do a certain task. And most of the times, the latency the external service, the third-party service they are using has is way more, and it results in SLO breaches. So they started collecting the complete latency with the latency for the request and the latency for the response they are getting back from the third-party service. They even have access to a third-party service metric and with some communication, and they are basically setting the SLO on that particular metric. But the rest of the part, I'm not sure. I don't have an example right now how anyone how people collect these metrics specifically and then set an SLO on that. So if anyone, like we have Prathamesh as well on the call like this. So if you have any example around it or anyone in doing it.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. So my internet is a bit patchy, so let me know if that is not working out. Sandeep, so basically what you do is for any of the client-side requests, that request also gets logged at some point, some part in your stack, right? Like maybe you're fronting your front end with Nginx, or there must be some reverse proxy that is handling those requests. So you can measure the latency there, and then you can compare the latency that is observed on some other layer, which is application layer or the load balancer layer. And that can give you a good enough idea about how the system is behaving differently at different layers of your stack. And that will basically give you an idea about where the impact is getting felt, or which layer is causing problems. As you mentioned that the UI is blocked in few cases, so you'll be able to sort of understand where exactly it is happening, and then you can, once you know that, then you can just go ahead and tackle that problem. So yeah, I think did I try to answer the question, or
that's okay, Prathamesh. I think the challenge is to the pattern, like how do we send this data to Prometheus from a untrusted desktop clients, and also if anything that you have seen in your experience for
Right.
patterns and sending this. I understand at a high level you have to collect a client and send it, right? But there are more challenges in how do you trust the client to send everything? Does it
Correct. For single page applications, it is a slightly tricky problem because you have to include the emitting metrics. So the part of emitting in the client side code itself. So that's where it gets slightly tricky. But you can include it from the from the place where the logs are getting generated. That can be a good place to start out. And because with single page applications and security concerns, it might be a little hard to emit it directly from the code. But you can basically just send the logs to a central place from where you can read it, and then further forward it to somewhere else where you can consume it with the other parts of your stack.
Thanks, Prathamesh.
Thanks, Prathamesh. Thanks, Sandeep, for that question. Awesome. Anyone else who would like to have? I think we should maybe any other question, Sandeep, Nagesh, Devesh. Anything, any doubts on the content that was covered? Would love to clarify and share. Just as a closing thought, SLO Computer, as Jayesh mentioned, is just our way of making things simple for the community. So please go ahead, give it a try, and happy to get some feedback and learn from all of you who have taken out time on a Saturday evening. So I appreciate it a lot. Yeah.
And yes, thank you folks for listening in, and thanks for the wonderful questions. So as Akshay said, please feel free to try out SLO Computer, give us feedback, and we'll definitely act on it. And if you have any questions, you can find us out on Twitter at SLO_computer. We do ping us there, or ping me or Akshay on the email at jayesh@lastnight.io or akshay@lastnight.io. And we will definitely be willing to help. We will, and if you have any feedback, send us there as well, and we will definitely act. So thank you, and have a wonderful weekend. Good night.
Thank you so much, Jayesh, for this session, and thank you everyone who took time and sort of participated in this. So thanks again. Cheers.
Thanks a lot. Bye.